In the quiet aftermath of the Great Mushroom War, life in Oo was scarce and strange. Deep in the ruins of a shattered city, something pink and alive began to take shape. From a massive primordial ooze known as the Mother Gum, a young gum girl emerged, Princess Bubblegum. She was not born like ordinary people, but formed of candy matter given life. With her came a timid noodly brother she named Nettie, who preferred to hide and drink sweet sap in the shadows. In those early days, little Bonnabelle wandered the crumbling remains of old Earth with curiosity. The world was silent and new, and she was one of the first lights of life to return. Though she was made of candy, the loneliness she felt was very real. Bonnabelle had a big heart eager for companionship, and so she dreamed of creating a family of her own in that empty, post-apocalyptic wasteland. Bonnabelle and Nettie made their home by a glowing green river, a place that, in time, would become the foundation of the Candy Kingdom. Every day, Bonnabelle cared for Nettie and learned about the world at her own gentle pace. She taught herself to think and feel independently, as there was no one else to guide her. Still, as seasons passed, the young gum girl realized caring for shy Nettie alone was not enough to fill her days. She longed for more company, for a family that could laugh and talk with her in the long, quiet nights. With determination and a bit of science and candy alchemy, Bonnabelle took pieces of her own candy essence and created 3 relatives to call her own: Uncle Gumbald, Aunt Lolly, and Cousin Chickle. In her mind, they would each have roles: a wise uncle, a sweet aunt, a playful cousin, and together they'd truly feel like a family. At first, it seemed wonderful. The candy relatives came to life, and young Bonnabelle was no longer alone. Together they began to shape the beginnings of a new society amid the ruins. It was Uncle Gumbald who first imagined building a candy city, a grand home for candy kind. Bonnabelle was excited by the idea of a kingdom where no one would ever be lonely. She threw herself into the project, working with childlike enthusiasm to please her new family. However, as the city plans grew, differences emerged between Bonnabelle and her uncle. Gumbald's vision was grand but cold, towering apartments and concrete plans, while Bonnabelle cherished a more whimsical, natural approach. When she discovered Gumbald had leveled a whole grove of taffy trees to clear land for his city, Bonnabelle felt a pang of dismay. To gently assert her own vision, she flooded the construction site and turned it into Lake Butterscotch, a sweet, shimmering lake where his buildings would have gone. She hoped this act would convince her uncle to preserve the sweet, simple beauty of their new home. Instead, it sparked his anger and resentment. Uncle Gumbald saw Bonnabelle's interference as childish defiance. Quietly, he began to plot a way to seize control of this Candy Kingdom dream for himself. One warm evening, Gumbald put his scheme into action. Pretending to be conciliatory, he sent Bonnabelle off on a harmless date with Mr. Cream Puff, a suitor he had created for her, to get her out of the way. While Bonnabelle was absent, Gumbald convened with Aunt Lolly and Cousin Chickle in secret. He unveiled a sinister creation of his own science, Dum Dum Juice. This potion would transform any gum person into a simple-minded candy being, docile and unable to govern, effectively neutralizing Bonnabelle as a threat. Gumbald spoke honeyed words to Lolly and Chickle, convincing them that Bonnabelle's removal would let them build the city and family life they wanted. But Gumbald's silver tongue hid cruel intent. To ensure his co-conspirators' loyalty, he spiked cupcakes with the Dum Dum serum and offered them to Lolly and Chickle as a treat during their plotting. Upon eating the enchanted cupcakes, the aunt and cousin fell under its curse. Aunt Lolly became a simple, cheerful piñata, and Cousin Chickle a giddy candy ball. They giggled mindlessly, now perfectly compliant to whatever Uncle Gumbald wanted. When Bonnabelle returned home from her outing, she was met not by the loving family she hoped for, but by Uncle Gumbald's betrayal. Gumbald attempted to splash Bonnabelle with the Dum Dum juice and reduce her to a mindless candy girl. In the struggle that followed, quick-witted Bonnabelle knocked the vial back toward Gumbald. In a twist of fate, the potion spilled onto Gumbald's own body, causing him to shrink and transform into an actual punch bowl full of fruit punch. a simple candy person with no memory of his former ambitions. In an instant, Bonnibel's treacherous uncle was reduced to an innocuous, smiling bowl who cared only about throwing parties. The threat had passed, but at a terrible cost. Bonnibel's only family had literally lost their minds. She stood in the midst of the chaos, her uncle now a muddle-minded punch bowl, her aunt and cousin chattering nonsense, and felt heartbreak well up inside her. All she had wanted was a happy family, and instead her closest kin had tried to hurt her. They had not truly loved her after all. The betrayal stung deeply in her candy soul. When the dust settled, the young princess-to-be had a choice to make. She gazed at the blissfully ignorant faces of her transformed family and told herself perhaps this fate was kinder to them. They would never scheme or feel hurt now. They would be happy in a simple way. So, with a heavy heart masked by a smile, Bonnibel declared herself princess of these new candy people. She would take care of her simple-minded Uncle Gumbald, Aunt Lolly, and Cousin Chickle, treating them as her subjects to ensure they could never hurt anyone or each other. If family could betray her, she decided she would rather rule subjects who only felt love and obedience. To avoid any future treachery, Bonnibel engineered her next creations, the Candy People, to be simple-minded and innocent, blissfully devoted to their princess. In time, the Candy Kingdom itself rose around that very spot, a land of sugary citizens who were kind, goofy, and in need of guidance. It was a kingdom of childlike laughter and candy laughter, with Princess Bubblegum as its pink, benevolent ruler. Despite the bright smiles of her subjects, Princess Bubblegum carried the loneliness of leadership in her heart. She had power and she had purpose, but the close family bond she yearned for was lost. Over the years, Bonnie worked tirelessly to build a safe haven for her candy people. She raised candy buildings and lollipop forests, baked gingerbread houses, and rock candy mountains. The Candy Kingdom's castle grew atop the very ground where the Mother Gum rested, a grand pink spire crowned with a red and white peppermint dome, visible for miles around. From its highest balcony, Princess Bubblegum could watch her subjects play in cotton candy streets and peppermint fields, and she vowed to protect their simple happiness at all costs. If that meant never creating another being as cunning as Gumbald, so be it. In her youth, she had learned a painful lesson about trust and control, one that would shape her rule for centuries to come. Indeed, she would come to regret making her people too simple as time went on, but that is a realization for later in her tale. For now, young Princess Bubblegum poured her energy into science and leadership. She was incredibly intelligent, an innovator who mixed candy and chemistry to improve her kingdom. Under her guiding hand, life in the Candy Kingdom was peaceful and nurturing. However, in quiet moments, the princess still felt pangs of longing. The Candy People adored her unquestioningly, but they could not truly understand her more complicated feelings. She was their ruler, almost a mother figure, and that set her apart. In secret, Bubblegum wished for an equal, someone she could talk to freely, someone who saw Bonnibel the person, not just the flawless princess. She had friends among her creations, of course. The ever-loyal Peppermint Butler was by her side from early on, a peppermint candy manservant with a knack for the mystical. Yet even Peppermint Butler, for all his devotion, addressed her as his sovereign. Princess Bubblegum's smile stayed bright, but a part of her heart remained lonely. As years turned to decades, Princess Bubblegum's Candy Kingdom flourished. The empty wasteland around her became filled with life and color. Gumball Guardians, huge round candy golems, were built under her direction to watch over the land. New candy citizens popped into existence from her experiments, each one unique. Banana guards to patrol the streets, candy corn villagers, gumdrop children, and more. To her people, Bubblegum was a wise and caring leader, always ready with encouragement or a new invention to make their lives better. Yet outside the borders of the Candy Kingdom, Ooh was still a wild and sometimes dangerous place, full of strange magic and wayward souls. One of those souls would soon cross paths with Bubblegum and change her forever. One fateful day, a hooded figure snuck into the Candy Kingdom. This was Shoko, a young human thief from a distant time. In fact, an earlier incarnation of a hero who would one day be very important to Bubblegum. Shoko had been hired by a gang to steal a precious treasure from the princess, her royal amulet, a small pendant that glowed with power. Sneaking into the castle, Shoko misjudged a jump and fell, injuring herself in the courtyard. Candy citizens found the unconscious intruder and brought her before the princess. Rather than punish the stranger, Princess Bubblegum chose kindness. She gently nursed Shoko's wounds and gave her a soft bed in the castle to recover. When Shoko awoke, she found not a jailer, but a friend, the princess herself sitting at her bedside with a gentle smile. Over the following days, Bubblegum and Shoko formed an unlikely friendship. Shoko, hardened by a life of crime, was disarmed by Bubblegum's genuine care. In the comfort of the Candy Kingdom, Shoko felt safe enough to share pieces of her past. How she'd lost her arm in a tragic accident as a child, how she fell in with a bad gang just to survive. Bubblegum listened with compassion and without judgment. In turn, the princess opened up about her own life, at least what she felt she could share, the burden of being responsible for an entire kingdom and the loneliness that responsibility brought. Despite coming from different worlds, the two young women understood each other's loneliness. Princess Bubblegum was so grateful for Shoko's company that she built Shoko a new mechanical arm to replace the one she'd lost. When Bubblegum presented this gift, a beautifully crafted prosthetic arm, Shoko was overcome with emotion. No one had ever shown her such pure kindness. Shoko even considered abandoning her mission to steal the amulet and starting a new life in the Candy Kingdom as Bubblegum's friend and ally. For a brief moment, it seemed the princess had found a true companion, and Shoko had found a home. But Shoko's criminal past was not so easily escaped. A spy from the gang that hired her lurked nearby and reminded Shoko of the threat hanging over her if she failed her job. Fearful of the gang's retribution, Shoko felt trapped. One night, torn between her loyalty to her new friend and her fear of her old masters, Shoko made a desperate choice. While Bubblegum slept, Shoko sneaked into the princess's chambers and gently lifted the ruby-red amulet from Bubblegum's neck. Alarms magically triggered. The Gumball Guardians roared to life, their single giant eyes firing warning lasers. Panicking, Shoko fled out a window and onto the castle's outer platforms, clutching the stolen amulet. Princess Bubblegum awoke with a start and ran after her, calling Shoko's name in confusion and worry. High on a platform above the castle's foundations, Shoko's escape went terribly wrong. A Guardian's laser struck near Shoko's feet, causing her to tumble off the ledge. Below yawned a river of toxic green waste, runoff from Bubblegum's scientific experiments. Princess Bubblegum could only watch in horror from above as her friend fell into the glowing river with a splash. The toxic liquid was deadly. When a Guardian reached in to try to save Shoko, its hand was dissolved by the acid. Bubblegum shouted for them to stop. It was too late. Heart pounding, she peered over the edge and saw no sign of Shoko, just the swirling green surface of the waste. The princess called out into the darkness, begging for her friend to somehow answer, but there was only silence. After several long moments, Bubblegum realized with growing sorrow that Shoko was gone, lost beneath the deadly pool. Her friend had perished, and the amulet along with her. Princess Bubblegum stood vigil for a time, staring at the toxic pit with tears in her eyes, hoping against hope that Shoko might crawl out alive. But there was no miracle that night. Eventually, with a heavy sigh and slumped shoulders, Bubblegum turned her back on the toxic river and walked away. She returned to her room, which suddenly felt emptier than ever. The next morning, the Candy Kingdom went on as usual, candy citizens laughing in the sun. But their princess was changed. She had lost one of her first true friends, and the pain of that loss settled deep in her candy heart. Though she continued to rule with grace, Bubblegum became a bit more guarded after Shoko's tragedy. It was a harsh lesson that even her kindness could not save everyone, and that trusting someone came with the risk of heartbreak. Little did Bubblegum know, Shoko's story was not completely over. The human girl's spirit remained tethered to the place of her demise, quietly haunting the Candy Kingdom's grounds as a restless ghost. Princess Bubblegum would not learn of this for centuries, not until a new hero would uncover the truth. But Shoko's memory lived on in Bubblegum's mind, a bittersweet reminder of the friend she couldn't save. In fact, the loss of the amulet would one day lead to a revelation for Bubblegum when it was finally returned to her by that very hero. For now, though, the princess carried on, tucking away her grief. She dedicated herself even more to her people and her experiments, building walls of duty around her. Heart. Even as Bubblegum's outward life prospered, her candy kingdom growing into a beacon of happiness in Oo, the weight of years began to accumulate behind her kind eyes. Imagine living for centuries, appearing as a teenager, yet experiencing so many lifetimes of joy and sorrow. That was Bubblegum's reality. By the time hundreds of years had passed, the Candy Kingdom was firmly established, and Princess Bubblegum was respected across the land as a just and clever ruler. But fate had more in store for her personal life. Another figure, destined to be even more important than Shoko, was about to step into her world. A vivacious young vampire with a bass guitar and a penchant for trouble, Marceline. Long before a certain human boy ever met Princess Bubblegum, the princess found an unexpected friend in Marceline the Vampire Queen. Marceline had been wandering Oo for centuries herself, a child of the post-war world like Bonnibel, though touched by demonic and vampiric magic. When Bubblegum first encountered Marceline, it was some time after the Candy Kingdom had been founded. By then, Bubblegum was appearing as a young woman and ruling a thriving kingdom. Marceline, eternally looking around 18 to 20, was a free spirit roaming the land. Their paths crossed perhaps by chance or shared curiosity, and a spark of friendship was lit. At first glance, the prim and proper princess and the edgy rock and roll vampire seemed complete opposites. Marceline was rough around the edges, playful and sometimes pulled pranks, while Princess Bubblegum was ladylike, methodical, and responsible. Yet, they bonded deeply. Both girls carried the loneliness of long lifespans and heavy pasts, and in each other, they found someone who truly understood. They could talk for hours, explore hidden corners of the Candy Kingdom, and be themselves without judgment. Marceline playfully nicknamed the princess Bonnie, teasing her formality, and Bubblegum found Marceline's wild streak both exasperating and exciting. For the first time in ages, Bonnie felt like a normal girl having fun with a friend, rather than a monarch on a pedestal. Their friendship blossomed into young love before either fully realized it. They spent countless nights together in the rock candy mines beneath the Candy Kingdom, a secret place of glittering crystal tunnels. Marceline loved to bring out Bubblegum's less serious side. One time Marceline spray painted some cave walls with goofy graffiti, and even got the princess to join in. Bubblegum giggled as she wrote, "Marceline made me write this," on the wall at Marceline's urging, leaving a bit of youthful mischief permanently etched in candy crystal. In those moments, Bonnie wasn't the high princess. She was just a girl enjoying adventures with her cool, rebellious girlfriend. Marceline also shared her music with Bubblegum. During one of her concerts, she tossed Bubblegum her worn rock band t-shirt, a memento of the night. Bubblegum took that shirt and treasured it. Its cotton fabric meant more to her than the finest silks because it came from Marceline. By the light of the Candy Kingdom's sunsets, the two would sit together, Marceline strumming her bass guitar, singing teasing songs, Bubblegum laughing and maybe singing along off-key. In Marceline's company, Bubblegum's stress and loneliness melted away, and in Bubblegum's steady presence, Marceline felt understood and cared for. Their relationship was a tender secret that only the stars and a few close friends were privy to. However, even sweet things can turn sour. As the Candy Kingdom kept growing, Bubblegum's responsibilities increased. She had more subjects to care for, more duties to juggle. Often she'd be called away to meetings or scientific projects, leaving Marceline feeling a bit neglected. Bubblegum started gently pushing Marceline away, not out of lack of love, but from a belief that she had to focus on being a perfect ruler. Marceline, a free spirit, didn't understand why Bonnie was suddenly so distant, canceling plans or growing tense when Marceline caused harmless trouble around the kingdom. To Marceline, it felt like Bubblegum was prioritizing her princess life over their relationship. To Bubblegum, it felt like Marceline didn't grasp the weight of the crown on her head. They never truly stopped caring for each other, but cracks of misunderstanding formed. The breaking point came with a crisis in a faraway land, the Glass Kingdom. A fearsome dragon named Molto Larvo threatened the Glass Kingdom's people, and they begged Princess Bubblegum to help. Bubblegum, ever dutiful, answered the call and traveled to the Glass Kingdom, bringing Marceline along for her formidable fighting skills. But this mission proved a test of both their abilities and their relationship. Bubblegum became intensely focused on defeating the dragon and protecting the Glass Kingdom's citizens, who were in grave danger. Marceline, meanwhile, saw her girlfriend becoming cold in all business, barely speaking except to strategize. During the confrontation with Molto Larvo, Bubblegum was so occupied with saving people that she unintentionally sidelined Marceline, perhaps dismissing one of Marceline's ideas, or scolding her for being too reckless. Marceline felt hurt and unappreciated, emotions boiling inside her like a raging storm. When the decisive moment came, Marceline let all her feelings out in the form of a raw, powerful song. She sang her heart out, a scathing song directed at Bubblegum, expressing the pain of feeling pushed away. Marceline's music carried magic in it. The song's vibrations rose to a furious, emotional climax that struck fear into the dragon and magically sealed it away in a crystal prison. The Glass Kingdom was saved by the overwhelming power of Marceline's heartfelt anger. As the echoes of the song faded, an eerie silence fell. Bubblegum stood there, stunned, not by the defeated dragon, but by Marceline's words that still hung in the air. In that moment, she realized just how deeply she had hurt Marceline, but the realization came too late. The dragon was stopped, the Glass Kingdom safe, yet something precious had shattered, the bond between Bonnibel and Marceline. Marceline's face was streaked with tears of rage and sorrow, and Bubblegum's own eyes brimmed with tears of regret. They had saved a kingdom, but lost each other. After that day, the pair separated. Bubblegum returned to the Candy Kingdom, and Marceline went her own way, nursing a broken heart. For Princess Bubblegum, it was perhaps the first time in centuries she felt true heartbreak, deeper even than what she felt for Shoko, because with Marceline it had been love, messy and real. Back in her castle, Bubblegum found Marceline's old rock shirt among her things. She held it close and felt an ache inside. She had chosen her duty over love, and it cost her dearly, but in her mind, it was what had to be done. Her people's needs were more immediate than her own desires. Responsibility demands sacrifice, she might have told herself to justify the pain. And so, Princess Bubblegum threw herself even more vigorously into her role as ruler. The following centuries saw her become somewhat infamous for her single-minded dedication. She built and invented tirelessly new candy citizens, elaborate defenses for her kingdom, research into the mysteries of Ooh. She gained a reputation as a brilliant scientist and a formidable leader, yet those who knew her well could sense an emotional distance. Bubblegum rarely spoke of Marceline, but one could find a hint of sorrow in her eyes on particularly quiet nights. Sometimes, when she was alone in her royal quarters, she would put on that cherished rock t-shirt and remember the vampire girl who gave it to her. The memory was bittersweet, a mix of warmth from the happy times and sadness from how it ended. Bubblegum's philosophical dilemma during these long years was balancing love with duty. She had learned painfully that as a ruler, she might have to forgo personal happiness. It was an emotionally mature understanding, but a heavy one to bear. To cope, she armored herself in logic and tasks. If she kept busy, there was no time to dwell on loneliness or regret. The Candy Kingdom prospered under her guidance. It was safe, orderly, and joyous for her citizens. Few could imagine that their eternally composed princess had once sung silly songs in a cave or swooned over a vampire. That chapter, Bubblegum believed, was over. She would govern with compassion, but also keep a certain professional detachment. Her people's welfare was her purpose, and she would not allow herself distractions from that path again. For a long time, Princess Bubblegum's life followed a steady, if solitary, rhythm. But change was on the horizon, a change in the form of a brave little boy with a big heart. As the 1000th year after the Mushroom War rolled on, a new hero rose in Ooh, Finn the human, a young adventurer, one of the only humans in the land, and his magical dog brother, Jake. Finn was just a 12-year-old boy when he first bounded into the Candy Kingdom on his quest to help anyone in need. Bubblegum met Finn during a candy zombie incident, one of her science experiments gone awry. And from that moment, a unique friendship took root. Finn was immediately smitten with the princess. To him, she was the prettiest, smartest, most amazing person he'd ever seen. He affectionately called her Princess, or PB, and blushed at her every smile. Bubblegum found Finn's crush endearing. After all, she appeared only a few years older than him. She didn't discourage his feelings outright. In fact, part of her was warmed by the innocent, unconditional adoration Finn gave. It had been so long since someone looked at her with such uncomplicated hero worship. She and Finn became close friends, teaming up on adventures often. Finn would bravely save Princess Bubblegum from dangers, whether it was the scheming Ice King trying to kidnap her, or the Lich's undead minions. Finn was there with sword in hand. And Bubblegum, for her part, also saved Finn on occasion using her wits and tech, like when she tracked him and Jake to a hidden cave to rescue them from the clutches of an evil heart monster. They developed a mutual respect. Finn admired Bonnie's brilliance and kindness, and Bubblegum admired Finn's courage and purity of heart. Though she cared for Finn deeply, Princess Bubblegum's feelings were not romantic in the way Finn's were. To her, Finn was a dear friend, even like a younger brother or a protege. She saw his crush and sometimes gently flirted or humored him, but she also knew that ultimately she could not be the girlfriend Finn dreamed of. For one, she was far older and had been through the highs and lows of love already. Finn was still a child in her eyes, with so much growing to do. And beyond that, Bubblegum still guarded her heart closely. She wasn't ready to risk deeper love, especially with someone she felt protective of. So she cherished their friendship, while trying subtly to help Finn move past his infatuation. This would come to a head through a dramatic series of events where Bubblegum's own life hung in the balance. The greatest evil in Ooh, the dreaded Lich, had reawakened, a skeletal manifestation of death that sought to destroy all life. Bubblegum, ever the strategist, sent Finn and Jake on a quest to stop the Lich before he could harm the world. She armed Finn with the gauntlet of the hero and even gave him a pink sweater she had knitted, hoping her love woven into it might protect him. In the ensuing battle, the Lich was defeated, but not without dire consequences. The Lich's spirit managed to escape and possessed Princess Bubblegum herself. In a terrifying moment back at the Candy Kingdom, Bubblegum was seized by the Lich's evil, her eyes turning blank green and her body twisting into a hideous candy blob monster. She roared and raged under the Lich's control, threatening to tear apart the very kingdom she had built. Finn was horrified and desperate not to hurt Bubblegum, but something had to be done. In the chaos, the Ice King helped by freezing the possessed Bubblegum with his ice powers, encasing her in a block of solid ice. The Lich's grip was halted, but then the ice tipped over and shattered Bubblegum's brittle candy body into pieces. The candy people gasped, and Finn cried out. Their princess was quite literally broken apart. Luckily, Bubblegum, being made of candy, could survive this if reassembled. The Candy Kingdom's doctors worked swiftly to gather every pink chunk and piece of taffy flesh to put her back together. They did their best, but some pieces were missing, lost in the commotion. When Bubblegum finally woke from the ordeal, she found herself physically younger, having lost a significant amount of mass. Instead of appearing 18 or 19 as usual, she now looked only 13 years old. The same age as Finn at that time. This transformation had big implications in the Candy Kingdom. At 13 years old, Princess Bubblegum was technically a minor and thus not of age to rule. According to Candy Kingdom law, the next oldest claimant would assume the throne until Bubblegum came of age again. That turned out to be the one and only Earl of Lemongrab, a sour-tempered, lemon-headed man Bubblegum had created long ago as an experiment. Lemongrab wasted no time declaring himself the ruler in Bubblegum's stead. Suddenly, Bubblegum found herself in a strange position. A young teen in appearance, relieved of her responsibilities for the first time in centuries, but also powerless to guide her kingdom during that time. Finn initially was overjoyed by Bubblegum's de-aging. To him, this meant Bonnie was now his age. Perhaps now she could truly be his girlfriend, and they could spend time like normal kids. And indeed, for a short while, Bubblegum allowed herself a taste of that simpler life. She and Finn hung out and played pranks on Lemongrab to try to get the grumpy Earl to leave the throne. They laughed together. Bubblegum indulged in the carefree youth that she'd never really had. Finn was smitten, and Bubblegum enjoyed his company without the burden of rulership on her shoulders. They even teamed up to serve Lemongrab absurd prank candies in hopes he'd quit ruling due to frustration. Those were fun times, a brief window where Bubblegum could just be a teen, and Finn could imagine a romantic possibility. However, it didn't last long. Lemongrab, while comically tyrannical, was making a mess of the kingdom with his overbearing ways. The candy people were miserable under his rule. Bubblegum knew she couldn't stay a kid forever if it meant leaving her people in Lemongrab's incapable hands. So, with a bit of ingenuity, she devised a solution. She would reclaim her missing candy biomass to age herself back up. Gathering some of the candy matter she had once shed, Bubblegum prepared to revert to her older self. Finn, still holding on to hope that 13-year-old Princess could be a lasting reality, sadly helped her with the procedure. In the process, Finn gave her a hug, and even an innocent kiss, which, combined with the candy matter, helped catalyze her restoration. In a magical flash, Princess Bubblegum grew from a petite teenager back into her elegant 18-year-old form. She was whole again, and once more the competent princess her kingdom needed. Finn smiled bravely, but inside his heart sank a little. He understood this was the right thing. Bubblegum had to be 18 to rule properly, yet it meant things between them would not change. Indeed, once Bubblegum was herself again, she gently resumed the more formal dynamic she had with Finn. She thanked him for his help with a warm hug, and even let him know how much she cared, but she also reestablished that she was the princess, and he the knightly friend. Realizing Finn might be hurt, Bubblegum clarified tenderly that, while she was flattered by his feelings, she was too old for him, and had responsibilities that came first. Finn took it in stride, as best as a 13-year-old could, and they remained close friends. Over time, Finn's crush waned, especially as he met others who captured his romantic attention. Bubblegum's return to her proper age also meant dealing with the consequences of her many scientific experiments. The Earl of Lemongrab, for example, was one such experiment, a person she'd created in the past to perhaps be an heir, or simply to see if lemon candy could live. That one had not turned out as she hoped. Lemongrab was unstable, lonely, and prone to screaming unacceptable at anything he disliked. After reclaiming her throne from him, Bubblegum tried to make amends. She created a second Lemongrab so that the Earl would have someone who understood him. For a time, the two Lemongrabs did calm each other, and even invited Bubblegum over for dinner, showing gratitude. Bubblegum thought she had solved his unhappiness by providing a friend like himself. However, Bubblegum's pattern of creating life to solve a problem sometimes led to bigger problems. The twin Lemongrabs eventually spiraled out of control. They started absorbing other candy beings to create a grotesque giant Lemongrab, turning their castle into a dystopia. This happened in part because Bubblegum left behind a formula for creating candy life, which Lemongrab misused. In the end, a huge crisis ensued, and one Lemongrab ended up sacrificing himself to feed the other. Bubblegum had to intervene and erase the life-giving formula from Lemongrab's mind to prevent further abuses. These events weighed on her conscience. She realized that while she always tried to do good, her urge to control outcomes, even by literally engineering people, could backfire horribly. Lemongrab's suffering and the chaos in his realm were direct results of her decisions. Ever analytical, Bubblegum filed these lessons away. Even a ruler as smart as she could make grave mistakes when playing with others' lives and free will. Another such moral challenge came with Flame Princess, the fiery young ruler of the Fire Kingdom. When Flame Princess began dating Finn, Bubblegum grew concerned. She knew something about Flame Princess that few did. As an elemental being of fire, Flame Princess's power was dangerously unstable. Years ago, Bubblegum had personally seen Flame Princess as an infant. Right after Flame Princess's birth, Bubblegum witnessed a prophecy that the child would be incredibly powerful. So powerful her own father, the Flame King, feared her. In fact, the Flame King ordered the baby to be left in the wilderness to die. Bubblegum intervened back then. Dressed in a protective suit, she rescued the infant Flame Princess from the woods and returned her to her father. Bubblegum admonished the Flame King to contain the child's power somehow, rather than let her run wild and hurt innocents. The Flame King responded by sealing his daughter in a lantern for most of her childhood, effectively imprisoning her. Bubblegum's intent had been to keep everyone safe, including the baby, but it resulted in Flame Princess growing up isolated and unloved. Now, years later, Flame Princess was free and trying to live a normal life, even finding romance with Finn. Bubblegum kept a watchful eye. She discovered at one point that a passionate kiss between Finn and Flame Princess could potentially cause a reaction that might literally burn a hole in the world. So, in an urgent scramble, Bubblegum guided Jake to intervene and stop the kiss, preventing a catastrophic eruption of elemental energy. Flame Princess never knew how close disaster came, or that Bubblegum had orchestrated the prevention. However, the truth of Bubblegum's past involvement eventually came out. When Flame Princess learned that Bubblegum was the one who suggested locking her up as a baby, she was furious and hurt. In Flame Princess's eyes, Bubblegum's actions had stolen her childhood and made her feel like a monster to be caged. During a tense confrontation, Flame Princess even called Princess Bubblegum a bad person for all this. That accusation cut Bubblegum deeply. She rarely heard such words directed at her, and certainly not from someone she earnestly meant to protect. Bubblegum tried to explain that she did what she thought was best to keep everyone safe, but the encounter left her shaken. She realized that her well-intentioned manipulations, even if for the greater good, could cause real pain and might indeed seem bad to those affected. Seeing Flame Princess's anguish made Bubblegum question herself. She never wanted to be a villain in anyone's story, yet to Flame Princess, she had been exactly that. These experiences highlighted the core struggle within Princess Bubblegum, the conflict between her rational duty and the emotional impact of her choices. She always sought to optimize safety and happiness, but sometimes at the cost of individual freedom or honesty. Whether it was engineering her citizens' natures, containing a dangerous child, or monitoring the realm with countless cameras, Bubblegum's methods could be seen as controlling, even paranoid. Over time, friends like Finn began to call her out when she crossed lines. One notable instance was when the Ice King unwittingly infected Candy People with a cold virus that only his magic tears could cure. Bubblegum, desperate to get the cure, resorted to extreme measures trying to make the Ice King cry, even strapping him down and frightening him. Finn confronted her, and Bubblegum realized with horror that she was on the verge of doing something truly cruel. She broke down in regret, showing that she did have a strong moral compass. She just sometimes lost sight of it under pressure. Throughout these trials, Finn and Jake remained steadfast friends to Bubblegum. Finn, having matured past his crush, now regarded Bubblegum as one of his best friends in the world. They would hang out casually, not just on missions, playing video games together, or chatting over scientific curiosities. Bubblegum found joy in these normal interactions. It was almost like having a little brother and a family with Finn, Jake, and their friends. One dear friend was Lady Rainicorn, Jake's partner, who was Bubblegum's contemporary and confidant. The two women bonded over their shared love of science and sometimes gossip. Bubblegum even learned Korean to communicate better. With friends like these, the princess wasn't quite as alone as she used to be. Still, leadership set her apart. There were long nights in her lab, as she toiled on experiments to better the kingdom. She created sentient beings like the adorable cinnamon bun and the regal hot dog knights, some silly, some serious. One major creation was Goliad, a candy sphinx-like entity. Bubblegum grew from her own DNA to be a potential successor in case she ever could not rule. Bubblegum poured all her knowledge into Goliad, but unfortunately also imparted her anxieties. The experiment went awry when Goliad tried to dominate others by force, believing absolute control was the way to protect the Candy Kingdom. In the end, Finn helped neutralize Goliad by creating an equal, Stormo, who held Goliad in a psychic stalemate. That taught Bubblegum that leading by fear or total control was not the answer. She quietly understood that the traits she passed on could become flaws in others. Through it all, Marceline the Vampire Queen was mostly absent from Bubblegum's life in these years. They had occasional encounters, often prickly or awkward. For example, when a door lord stole items from several friends, they ended up on a quest together. During that caper, Marceline vented her lingering feelings in a fiery song, "I'm Just Your Problem," revealing how she felt Bubblegum thought little of her. Bubblegum was taken aback. She hadn't realized Marceline still felt so strongly. In truth, Bubblegum was simply masking her own hurt by acting indifferent. At the end of that adventure, Bubblegum retrieved Marceline's shirt that had been taken, and notably, she chose to put it on rather than discard it. Marceline saw that and smiled privately, recognizing it as a silent olive branch. Their friendship was beginning, slowly, to mend. Another step toward reconciliation came when Marceline's cherished childhood teddy bear, Hambo, was lost to an evil witch. Marceline was distraught at losing this precious keepsake. Bubblegum found out and, without hesitation, offered something incredibly personal in exchange. She traded her rock shirt, the one Marceline had given her long ago, to get Hambo back for Marceline. This selfless act spoke volumes. Marceline realized Bonnabelle still deeply cared, enough to give up one of the last tokens of their past love. After that, things were better. They weren't exactly back to their old closeness, but an unspoken understanding passed between them. All these small moments built up to a turning point in Bubblegum's life, a moment when she would truly need her friends and would learn what she meant to her people. That moment was her downfall, and ultimately her renewal as the ruler of the Candy Kingdom. For years, Princess Bubblegum had been the unchallenged ruler of the Candy Kingdom. She had created the kingdom after all, and her people loved her like a parent. However, her tight control and secrets had sown the seeds of unease in some corners. Some candy citizens whispered about her more questionable deeds. There were rumors of candy monsters she created and locked away, of rattleball robots she built and later destroyed, and of course many recalled how she could be very strict. Still, no one openly opposed her until a charismatic figure known as the King of Ooh arrived. The King of Ooh was a charlatan, but a convincing one, who promised the candy people whatever they wanted to hear. In an unprecedented move, he called for an election to let the candy people choose their leader. Bubblegum, confident in the love and logic of her citizens, agreed to a fair vote, believing they would see through the king's empty promises. To her shock, Bubblegum lost the election. The candy people, in their childlike naivete, were swayed by the King of Ooh's grandiose claims of endless freebies and parties. Bubblegum hadn't even campaigned. She thought it unnecessary to advertise all the genuine care she had given for centuries. When the votes were tallied, the result was clear. The King of Ooh was declared the new Princess of Candy Kingdom. Bubblegum stood on the balcony as the results came in, looking out at the innocent, hopeful faces of her citizens. They didn't fully understand what they had done. In that moment, Bubblegum's heart broke in a new way. These beloved subjects, her children in a sense, had chosen a con man over her. Did they truly not know how much she sacrificed for them? Rather than let anger take over, Bubblegum swallowed her pain. She refused to lash out or cling to power. With dignity, she removed her crown and set it aside, stepping down peacefully. She said nothing bitter, only that she hoped the Candy Kingdom would be well. But those close to her saw the hurt in her eyes as she turned away. Quietly, under cover of night, Princess Bubblegum left the Candy Kingdom. By her side was the ever-faithful Peppermint Butler, who would not abandon his princess, even if the kingdom had. They ventured to the only shelter Bubblegum still owned, a small old cabin in the woods at the edge of her domain. Interestingly, a cabin that Uncle Gumbald had built long ago when he first plotted his Candy City. It was dusty and run down, but Bubblegum and Peppermint Butler cleaned it up and made it a humble new home. For the first time in a millennium, Bubblegum had no one to govern except herself. It was a strange feeling. She spent her days repairing the cabin, tending a little pumpkin patch out back, and monitoring the kingdom from afar. Peppermint Butler tried to cheer her up with tea and occult jokes, but the princess often gazed toward her Candy Kingdom with worry, like a mother separated from her child. In truth, this vacation from ruling forced Bubblegum to confront herself. Without daily statecraft to occupy her, she had time to reflect on who Bonnibel was aside from being a princess. It wasn't easy. She felt depressed and anxious often, wondering if she had been a bad leader for her people to reject her. One lonely evening, when her thoughts were particularly dark, an unexpected guest arrived at the cabin. Marceline. The vampire queen showed up, wordlessly offering support in the way only she could, with a confident smirk and the unspoken implication, "I'm here for you, like it or not." Marceline had heard of Bubblegum's ousting and, concerned for Bonnie's well-being, came to check on her. Bubblegum was surprised but genuinely happy to see Marceline. In the warm lamplight of that old cabin, they sat and talked, perhaps more openly than they had in centuries. Marceline teased Bubblegum about living in a dirty old cabin, trying to get a laugh. Eventually, she succeeded. Bubblegum chuckled and rolled her eyes, retorting that it was her cabin, thank you very much, and she was making the best of it. One night during this exile period, a problem arose that gave these two all the excuse needed to spend time together. Vermin creatures began raiding her pumpkin patches. They were pesky, wild beasts eating the pumpkins she had bioengineered. Rather than let them destroy the only project keeping her busy, Bubblegum grabbed her crossbow and decided to eliminate the varmints. Marceline insisted on tagging along, partly to help, partly to make sure Bubblegum didn't do anything reckless alone. And so, the two embarked on an impromptu midnight varmint hunt. It was just like old times in the cave, albeit with more actual varmints and less graffiti. As they crept through the overgrown fields and the ruins of Bubblegum's first candy laboratories, they talked, really talked. In the quiet darkness of the crystal mines, the same mines where they'd once scrawled graffiti, Marceline and Bubblegum found the wall they had decorated together ages ago, still faintly bearing the words, "Marceline made me write this." It was like discovering a time capsule of their friendship. Bubblegum ran her fingers over the crystal surface, remembering the laughter from that day. Marceline gently confronted Bubblegum about the distance that had grown between them. She admitted she missed their late-night talks and dumb jokes. Bubblegum, voice soft, confessed that she missed it too, but had felt so overwhelmed by her duties that she didn't know how to maintain their relationship. In that moment, Bubblegum allowed herself to be vulnerable. She apologized for pushing Marceline away long ago. Marceline, in turn, apologized for not understanding what Bubblegum was going through at the time. They smiled at each other, a bit teary-eyed, and it felt as if a great weight was lifted. The tension of centuries was dissolving. Their heart-to-heart was interrupted by the chittering of the pumpkin-eating varmints. Together, Marceline and Bubblegum fought off the little beasts in the dark, working back-to-back seamlessly. At one point, Marceline was nearly overwhelmed by a swarm of critters, and Bubblegum fearlessly jumped in to defend her, firing pink energy arrows with pinpoint accuracy. With teamwork, they managed to drive the varmints away from the precious pumpkins. After the action, they collapsed next to each other on the ground, breathing hard but laughing. Bubblegum's face was flushed with excitement and relief, not from the varmint fight, but from the feeling of camaraderie with Marceline. She hadn't realized how much she missed this, being herself with someone who truly knew her. By the end of that night, under a sky full of stars, Princess Bubblegum and Marceline had repaired their friendship to a beautiful degree. Marceline slung an arm around Bonnie's shoulders as they walked back to the cabin, humming a soft tune. Bubblegum leaned her head against Marceline for a moment, something she would have been too proud or shy to do before. It was comforting, and Marceline didn't mind at all. The exile that had begun as Bubblegum's lowest moment had unexpectedly given her something precious back. Marceline's unwavering friendship and love. The two promised that no matter what, they wouldn't drift apart like that again. Marceline even made Bubblegum vow to call on her if she ever needed help, princess or not. Back at the cabin, life felt a little less gloomy. Bubblegum even invited a few other friends over for casual get-togethers. One could imagine her, Marceline, Peppermint Butler, and maybe Finn and Jake sitting on the porch of that cabin, roasting marshmallows and just being friends under the night sky. It was humble and sweet. Meanwhile, the Candy Kingdom under the King of Oo's misrule was spiraling into absurdity. He had no real care for the citizens. He just indulged in royal luxuries. Things came to a head when an old menace re-emerged indirectly because of the Candy Kingdom's instability. Far away, Marceline had recently undergone a quest of her own to rid herself of vampirism. In doing so, she accidentally unleashed an ancient dark cloud, the essence of the Vampire King, which drifted toward the Candy Kingdom. At the same time, the Candy people finally realized how much they needed Princess Bubblegum. In a moment of chaos, one small candy citizen named Crunchy had had enough of the fraudulent King of Ooh. In the throne room, Crunchy literally pushed the King of Ooh into a fireplace, revealing that the so-called king was made of wax. He melted into a puddle, gone for good. With their false leader dispatched, the Candy people were lost and scared as the dark cloud approached to wreak havoc. Their true princess did not hesitate. Bubblegum heard the commotion and saw the looming dark mass advancing on her kingdom. Donning her royal gown once more, she rushed back to the Candy Kingdom with Marceline and her friends at her side. The citizens rejoiced at Bubblegum's return. They swarmed around, apologizing in their simple way and pleading for her leadership. Bubblegum forgave them in an instant. All that mattered was protecting her people from the impending threat. Marceline, Finn, Jake, and Bubblegum teamed up to face the dark cloud creature that threatened to consume the kingdom. It was a fierce battle, with Marceline using her reclaimed vampire powers and Finn wielding his sword, while Bubblegum directed the defense and fired her own energy gadgets. In the end, the dark cloud was dissipated. Marceline's new sunlight powers might have done the trick, or perhaps it was a combined effort of all. When the skies cleared, the Candy Kingdom was safe once more, and Princess Bubblegum was carried on the shoulders of her subjects, triumphantly returning to her throne. Peppermint Butler, who had heroically fought, but also gotten smashed to bits in the fray, was quickly reconstituted by Bubblegum now that she had her lab back. The Candy Kingdom was whole, and its people had learned to appreciate their princess more than ever. Bubblegum's rule was restored not by force, but by the genuine realization among the Candy people that they needed her and she truly cared. They even erected a new royal portrait of her, which humorously portrayed both her sweet side and a hint of her stricter, scarier side. Bubblegum had to laugh when she saw it. She accepted that yes, she had a bit of a scary streak, but it was all out of love. Having Marceline back in her life also meant Bubblegum was happier and less stressed. The Candy Kingdom noticed their princess was a bit more relaxed, a bit quicker to smile after her return. They might not have known, But some evenings, Marceline would swoop into Princess Bubblegum's window, and the two would spend quiet hours together, Marceline playing a gentle song on her guitar, while Bubblegum finished some experiment, or both of them just talking about their day. Marceline even got along with Peppermint Butler. They bonded over pranking Bubblegum sometimes or sharing supernatural tidbits. All seemed well again, yet in the shadows, a long-forgotten threat was stirring. Remember Uncle Gumbald and the other family members Bubblegum had accidentally imprisoned in candy form so many centuries ago? It turns out they were not as gone as Bubblegum thought. The punch bowl, piñata, and candy ball that were Gumbald, Lolly, and Chickle had remained within the Candy Kingdom all this time, unseen in plain sight. Over the years, they had slowly regained awareness, their enchantment wearing off. The Banana Guards even had a rumor about how the first candy people turned on PB and were turned into monsters, though few knew it referred to those three specifically. Now, with Bubblegum busy fending off external threats, her old family saw a chance to exact revenge. Princess Bubblegum awoke one morning to alarming news. A new city-state called Gumbaldia had cropped up on the border of her realm. Reports said its leaders were none other than Uncle Gumbald, Aunt Lolly, and Cousin Chicle, restored to their original forms and building an army. Bubblegum felt a chill. Her past had literally risen up against her. She soon confirmed that her former family members had indeed reversed the candy transformations. Now they remembered everything, her foiling of Gumbald's plans, their long imprisonment in simple forms, and they were furious. Gumbald, in particular, had not forgiven being reduced to a punch bowl for 800 years. If anything, his hatred had festered, and he had grand new schemes to claim the Candy Kingdom for himself. Ever the pragmatic leader, Bubblegum decided to prepare for war. She fortified her kingdom's defenses and rallied allies. Finn and Jake offered to go on a diplomatic mission. Finn, always hopeful for a peaceful solution, believed maybe they could talk Gumbald down. Bubblegum agreed to let them try, though she doubted her uncle's intentions. Finn met with Gumbald and, using his innate likability, actually managed to get Gumbald to chat and bond a bit. There was a moment where it seemed like perhaps the old Gum family feud could be settled without bloodshed. Gumbald smiled and proposed a toast to peace, producing a celebratory juice. Finn and Jake, trusting the gesture, were doused in the juice as part of a supposed treaty ritual. They returned to Bubblegum with good news. Gumbald had signed a peace treaty. Bubblegum's eyes lit up at this unexpected success. She rushed forward to hug Finn in relief, but suddenly stopped, sniffing the air. Finn and Jake were coated in a strange scent. Bubblegum's relief turned to horror as Peppermint Butler touched the residue and instantly transformed into a mindless baby peppermint, drooling and cooing. Bubblegum recognized it at once. Dum-Dum Juice. Her uncle had tried to repeat his old trick, using Finn and Jake as unwitting carriers to dose her. If she had embraced Finn, she'd have been splashed and reduced to a simple candy fool. Finn was shocked and angered that their treaty had been a ruse. Peppermint Butler fortunately recovered, but the message was clear. Gumbald had declared war, with treachery and deceit. Princess Bubblegum's heart hardened. She would not underestimate Uncle Gumbald again. Standing tall in her war room, clad in a serious expression, and eventually donning battle armor, she formally declared war on Gumbaldia. This conflict would be known as the Great Gum War, a final showdown that had been centuries in the making. Bubblegum marshaled her troops, banana guards, candy citizens willing to fight, and allies from other kingdoms who owed her favors. By her side stood Marceline, Finn, and Jake, and even Lady Rainicorn and BMO and others came to help. On Gumbald's side, an army of gum and candy creations advanced, along with some unlikely partners he'd recruited. It was a tense buildup. As the two forces converged on the battlefield at the border, Bubblegum took a deep breath. She looked across the field and saw Uncle Gumbald, flanked by Aunt Lolly and Cousin Chickle, all glaring at her with resentment. How strange it was, she thought, that this was her family. Once happy figments of her imagination, now truly enemies. She felt sorrow, but also resolved. The Candy Kingdom had to be protected. Gumbald would only bring tyranny if he won. Still, Bubblegum was not bloodthirsty. She wanted to avoid unnecessary violence if possible. Finn sensed this in her, and at the last moment, the ever-heroic boy made one more attempt to stop the war. Using a concoction of psychic tandem magic, Finn caused himself, Jake, Bubblegum, and Gumbald to enter a shared dream realm where he hoped to resolve their conflict with imagination rather than fighting. Within the nightmare, they confronted symbolic scenarios of what the war could lead to: utter ruin, tragedy, regret. Bubblegum and Gumbald both saw terrifying visions. Perhaps Bubblegum witnessed a version of herself defeating Gumbald, but at the cost of becoming a ruthless tyrant, or Gumbald saw his victory resulting in a hollow kingdom with no real family to enjoy it. The nightmare forced each of them to face the ugliest sides of their desires. When they awoke, Bubblegum was shaken. Finn's message was clear: war would only bring heartbreak. She stepped forward and offered Gumbald one more chance, a genuine peace, for real this time. For a moment, Gumbald appeared to consider it. However, Uncle Gumbald's bitterness was too deep. He gave a signal to proceed with an attack anyway. But unbeknownst to him, Aunt Lolly had experienced the nightmare too, and it changed her perspective. She remembered the loving niece Bonnibel once was, and how their family dream had turned dark. When Gumbald moved to strike, Lolly intervened. In a swift move of duplicity, Aunt Lolly flung Dum Dum Juice at Gumbald himself. Caught off guard, Gumbald was splashed by his own potion and reverted into punch bowl form once again, the very fate he'd planned for Bubblegum. The battlefield fell silent in surprise. The grand Uncle Gumbald, instigator of war, was now a harmless, goofy punch bowl prancing about and offering cups of fruit punch. The conflict between Bubblegum and her uncle abruptly ended in that instant. Bubblegum stood blinking, processing what just happened. Aunt Lolly stepped forward between the two armies, raising a white flag. She apologized to Bubblegum, perhaps with tears in her eyes, for everything, their betrayal, the war, and offered peace. She no longer wished to fight her niece. The grand candy kingdom that both Bonnibel and Gumbald had envisioned long ago could still exist, together, without war. Moved, Bubblegum walked out to meet Aunt Lolly. In front of everyone, the princess and her aunt embraced. Bubblegum forgave Lolly, and Lolly asked for forgiveness in return. Bubblegum then declared in a clear, calm voice that the war was over before it began. The Candy Kingdom and Gumbaldia would live in harmony, as two kingdoms under a truce, or perhaps as one reunited kingdom. Hearing this, candy people on both sides dropped their weapons with relieved cheers. There would be no fighting today. Yet, as fate would have it, peace was not the final challenge of that day. High above, the sky suddenly cracked open with an ominous energy. In the chaos of the nightmare and the charged emotions of the would-be battle, a greater evil had been inadvertently summoned. Golb, a malevolent deity of chaos and entropy, appeared in Oo's sky, roaring with a soundless void. A third party's meddling had drawn this godlike being into their world. With Golb's arrival, reality itself trembled. The cheerful Candy Kingdom and all its residents were now in immediate peril of annihilation, as Golby began to unleash horrific monsters that dropped from the sky like red-black comets. In an instant, the newly reconciled armies of Candy Kingdom and Gumbaldia found themselves on the same side, scrambling for survival. Princess Bubblegum snapped into action, commanding everyone to evacuate and seek shelter. Massive, bizarre creatures, mutations of candy matter and dark magic, stampeded across the battlefield. One monstrous being lunged at Bubblegum herself, knocking her down. She wasn't a superpowered adventurer. She could have been crushed right then. Marceline, witnessing Bubblegum in danger, burst into her most fearsome form, a winged, demonic vampire with eyes glowing red. In a whirlwind of teeth and rage, Marceline fought off the creature, but not before fearing she saw Bubblegum grievously hurt. In fact, Bubblegum had been hit by a projectile and fell, unconscious for a brief moment. Marceline thought the worst, thinking Bubblegum might be dead. Marceline let out a howl of anguish and fury, decimating any foe near her. This scene, while chaotic, spoke volumes. Marceline's love for Bubblegum was so strong that the mere thought of losing her drove Marceline to unleash her full power. Moments later, Bubblegum stirred. She had been protected by body armor under her clothes and was just a bit winded. When Marceline realized Bubblegum was alive, she rushed to her side, practically scooping Bonnie into her arms. Bubblegum gently cupped Marceline's face, calming her from the feral rage, assuring her she was okay. There might not have been time for many words, but their eyes said everything, profound relief and love. Together, alongside all their allies, they refocused on the colossal issue at hand. Golb. In the end, victory over Golb didn't come from brute force, but from the power of creativity and music. A song of friendship sung by Finn, Simon, Marceline, and others managed to disrupt Golb's chaos. It was as if the harmony of their voices and hearts countered the disharmony of the entity. Golb was banished, taking with it some individuals, like Bubblegum's friend Betty, who heroically sacrificed herself to neutralize Golb, fusing with it in the process. The sky cleared, the monsters vanished, and quiet fell over the land once more. As the dust settled, Princess Bubblegum found herself surrounded by friends and family alike. Aunt Lolly stood nearby, concerned but respectful now, with Chickle by her side. Marceline hovered next to Bubblegum, refusing to let her out of sight after that scare. Finn and Jake slumped to the ground, exhausted but happy that Ooh was saved yet again. In that calm after the storm, Bubblegum realized how precious and fragile everything was. Her kingdom, her loved ones, life itself. They had nearly lost all, but instead they were given a second chance. Candy citizens and Gumbaldia soldiers began to mingle, tending to each other's injuries, sharing water and sweets. The war that almost was had been utterly forgotten in the face of a greater threat. Perhaps something about staring down oblivion made everyone hold a little tighter to their compassion. And then, one of the sweetest moments of Bubblegum's long life occurred. Marceline, overwhelmed with emotion from nearly losing Bonnibel, finally acted on feelings long held in her heart. In front of everyone, Marceline gently took Bubblegum's hand. Bubblegum turned to face her, already knowing what was coming and looking equal parts amused and happy. With a relieved laugh, Marceline pulled Bubblegum into a deep, loving kiss. Bubblegum closed her eyes and leaned in, kissing back with all the warmth and love she'd held for Marceline over centuries. Time seemed to stop for them. Finn's jaw dropped in surprise, Jake's eyes popped, and the candy people collectively gasped in giddy delight. Their princess was kissing a vampire, but a heartbeat later, the crowd of onlookers broke into cheers. In that joyous moment, the people of the Candy Kingdom saw another side of their ruler, not just a princess, but a person who could love and be loved. It made her even more real and endearing to them. When they finally pulled apart, Bubblegum and Marceline stayed close, foreheads touching and smiles on their faces. Marceline quietly murmured something like, "I thought I lost you." Bubblegum squeezed her hand and perhaps replied, "I'm not going anywhere, Marceline." It was an emotionally mature, hard-won moment of happiness. Two souls who had lived through so much chaos and toil, finding solace in each other at last. With the threat over and the Great Gum War averted, Princess Bubblegum focused on reuniting and healing her kingdom. She welcomed Aunt Lolly and even the re-punch-bowled Punchy into the Candy Kingdom with forgiveness. Lolly, contrite and humbled, became an ally and helped undo any damage from the pre-war. After all, she still cared for the idea of family, and now had a second chance to be part of Bubblegum's life in a positive way. Chickle, less inclined to responsibility, went off on his own little misadventures perhaps, but without ill will. As for Punchy, Bubblegum decided to let him be happy as he was, organizing punch parties for candy folks, rather than try to restore him. Perhaps that was mercy, or perhaps caution, or a bit of both. The Candy Kingdom entered a golden era of peace. Having faced the ultimate enemy and reconciled old feuds, Bubblegum's domain was stronger than ever. The princess returned to her typical duties, but with a lighter heart. She started delegating a bit more, too. She realized she didn't have to carry every burden alone. With Aunt Lolly's help in administration, Finn and Jake handling adventurous quests, and Peppermint Butler ever ready in secret matters, Bubblegum could finally take small breaks. And of course, much of her free time she spent with Marceline. In the months and years after the Great Gum War, Princess Bubblegum's life gained a new balance. The Candy Kingdom was secure, her subjects content, and she had love in her life to nourish her spirit. She and Marceline became an openly acknowledged couple, something that at first caused much excited whispering among the candy citizens, but soon just became another beloved fairy tale in their storied kingdom. Bubblegum herself seemed to glow a bit brighter. Her smiles came more easily, and she even took days off now and then. This was shocking to those who knew her workaholic ways of old. One can imagine Princess Bubblegum and Marceline establishing a comfortable routine. Marceline might move some of her items into the castle, though she kept her own place for when she needed alone time, or Bubblegum was busy with boring politics. Often Marceline would be found lounging in Bubblegum's lab upside down, playfully disrupting a science experiment with a poke, making Bubblegum giggle and shoo her away jokingly. Other times, they'd go out on adventures together. The princess and the vampire queen made a formidable team and a charming sight to behold. Candy citizens would wave as they saw their princess flying on Marceline's back, both laughing as they soared through the bubblegum pink sky at sunset. Their bond continued to deepen, healing any lingering wounds from their past. They talked through any old unresolved feelings on quiet nights. Marceline learned about Shoko's story, Bubblegum finally sharing that tale of loss, and offered comfort, assuring Bonnie that Shoko found peace. Finn had told Marceline about Shoko's ghost and how it was laid to rest when Finn returned the amulet. Bubblegum, in turn, listened to Marceline's own traumas, the loss of her father's trust, the loneliness of immortality, and vowed to be there so Marceline would never feel alone again. They grew not just as lovers, but as partners who supported each other's growth. Sometime after the war, an issue from long ago resurfaced, the matter of that sealed dragon, Molto Larvo, in the Glass Kingdom. A young glass boy accidentally cracked the dragon's prison, threatening to unleash it once more. When news reached Marceline and Bubblegum, it dredged up complicated feelings. That dragon was tied to the very event that had broken them up ages past. Now they would have to face it together, as a couple. It was both frightening and cathartic. In the special journey known as Obsidian, Marceline and Bubblegum traveled to the Glass Kingdom again. Bubblegum was nervous, returning to the site of one of her greatest regrets. But Marceline was with her every step, squeezing her hand when anxiety rose. The Glass people welcomed them as legendary heroes. They had heard the tale of Marceline's original song that subdued the beast. When the dragon inevitably awoke and attacked, Marceline struggled at first. Her old anger wasn't there in the same way. She had grown, moved past it, so the same song wouldn't work. She needed new inspiration, and she found it in Bubblegum. Instead of singing from a place of pain and resentment, Marceline crafted a song of healing and devotion. Bubblegum, in a show of vulnerability, even admitted to Marceline some guilt she'd held onto, that maybe she had not appreciated Marceline's feelings back then. Marceline responded with music, conveying that it was okay, that she understood now, and that their love had only become stronger for all they went through. The resulting performance calmed the raging dragon and ultimately saved the Glass Kingdom once again. In the aftermath, in front of an audience of glass people, Marceline and Bubblegum reaffirmed their commitment. Bubblegum found herself grinning ear to ear when Marceline introduced her casually as "my vampire girlfriend" to the glass folk, who applauded and swooned at how cool that was. The trip to the Glass Kingdom served as a final closure for their ancient rift. No more unresolved business, no more unspoken apologies. It was all out in the open, forgiven and transformed into understanding. Marceline and Bubblegum could truly look forward now. In fact, they half-jokingly talked about spending eternity together. It wasn't just a romantic hyperbole. Marceline was ageless due to her vampire nature, and Bubblegum, as an elemental candy being, could potentially live forever as well, so long as she kept regenerating her candy biomass and wasn't destroyed. The notion that they could share their long lives brought them both great comfort. Neither would have to be alone again as the centuries rolled on. Back home in the Candy Kingdom, things were evolving too. Finn and Jake eventually grew older and went on more personal quests. Finn even voyaged across the sea to learn of his human origins for a while, and Jake dealt with his familial duties. Bubblegum supported them like a proud sister, always ready to welcome them back with a new mission or a celebratory party. The kingdom continued to advance in technology under Bubblegum's guidance. She even established a school to teach science to eager candy youngsters, ensuring the kingdom wouldn't always have to rely solely on her inventions. But as decades passed peacefully, a thought began to form in Princess Bubblegum's mind. Perhaps one day she could step back from ruling, at least a little. She had groomed capable individuals for leadership, like the Banana Guard's higher-ups and Peppermint Butler. Despite his odd, spooky hobbies, he was deeply loyal and knew the ins and outs of governance. Bubblegum realized that she finally trusted her people and friends enough to know things wouldn't fall apart without her constant oversight. All those years of micromanaging, of fearing everything would collapse if she loosened control, she saw now that it wasn't necessary. The Candy Kingdom had become more than just her creation. It was a living community that could stand on its own feet. So Princess Bubblegum started taking more time for Bonnabelle the person. She and Marceline traveled a bit, visiting distant corners of Ooh. They even got matching tattoos, or tried the tattoo artist's needle hilariously couldn't penetrate Bubblegum's chewy skin, so she ended up with no mark, but Marceline got hers, and Bonnabelle laughed it off, joking that maybe she'd just stick to wearing a candy symbol on her shirt instead. They went to concerts, sometimes performing impromptu duets that astonished onlookers. Who knew the princess could sing a scientific lullaby while Marceline riffed on bass? They had picnics by the butterscotch lake that Bubblegum once made, reminiscing about the very beginning and marveling at how far they'd come. In time, Bubblegum might have officially handed over more duties to her trusted aides. There's a hint that far in the future, the Candy Kingdom was being looked after by Peppermint Butler, who donned her crown in her absence, and a statue of Princess Bubblegum stood in the Candy Kingdom, honoring her legacy. What became of Bubblegum then? Some say she and Marceline simply went exploring the world together, finally free of all responsibilities, two immortals in love having grand adventures of their own. Others like to think she's just taking a very long sabbatical and might return to rule once more if ever needed. But one thing is certain, Princess Bonnabelle Bubblegum's story is one of growth, change, and enduring love. From the tiny gum girl born in a wasteland to the strong, benevolent ruler of a candy metropolis, she experienced more than most beings could in 10 lifetimes. She made mistakes, some big, some small, and she learned from each of them. She discovered that intelligence and logic alone weren't enough. She needed heart and empathy, which she found through her friends and her own introspection. She faced loneliness, and then she found companionship in the most beautiful of ways. She went from believing she had to carry every burden alone to allowing others in to help and to love her. Now, picture the Candy Kingdom at dusk one more time. The cotton candy clouds reflect the golden light of the setting sun. On a balcony of the Candy Castle, Princess Bubblegum stands holding hands with Marceline. They look out over the kingdom they've saved and nurtured, where candy people are finishing up their day with laughter, heading home to gumdrop houses as lanterns begin to glow. Bubblegum's hair is down, and she's traded her lab coat for a comfortable sweater. Marceline hovers just a tad to be at the same height, resting her head against Bubblegum's. In this serene moment, Bubblegum closes her eyes and feels truly at peace. Her kingdom is safe, her loved ones are near, and she is content. A gentle night breeze sways the peppermint trees in the garden below. Marceline hums an old tune, and Bubblegum softly joins in. No words, just a harmony that sounds like a lullaby. It's the same harmony that once helped bring life back to Ooh against Gulb, but now it's just for them and the quiet night. Fireflies dance above the meadow, and in the distance, You can hear Cinnamon Bun telling a funny story to some kids about the Great Pickle War. A nonsensical tale, surely. All is well. Princess Bubblegum reflects on her long journey, the sorrows, the joys, the friends gained, the friends lost and found again, the burdens of a crown, and the simple pleasures of a shared donut or a scientific breakthrough. Every piece of it, bitter or sweet, led her to this point. She has become an ever-patient, wise, and kind ruler, but also a friend, a girlfriend, a mentor. She knows there will be more challenges in the future. There always are in OO, but she's not afraid. She trusts herself and the people around her. As the stars come out, one might imagine Bubblegum saying quietly, "Thank you." Perhaps to the universe, to her mother gum progenitor, or just in general, grateful to have grown and to still be here. Marceline squeezes her hand as if hearing the unspoken sentiment and replies, "Love you, Bonnabelle." Bubblegum turns to Marceline, her eyes sparkling like the night sky, and replies, "I love you too, Marceline, always." They share a soft kiss under the first twinkle of stars, and so we leave them there in that tranquil scene. Princess Bubblegum, the candy elemental, the beloved ruler of the Candy Kingdom, finally at peace with herself, standing alongside the love of her life. Her story, long and winding, shows that even in a world of magic and monsters, the sweetest victories are those of the heart. It's a tale of candy and rock music, of science and magic, of mistakes and forgiveness. It's a tale to remind us that people can change and learn no matter how old, that responsibility is important, but so are friends, and that love, in all its forms, is the most powerful element of all. As the land of OO settles into the night, we can drift to sleep comfortably, knowing that Princess Bubblegum's Candy Kingdom is in good hands. The candy streets are quiet, the guardians keep watch, and our pink princess sleeps soundly, no longer alone. Her story continues on, ever sweet and ever after. Sleep well, dear listener, with this comforting thought. In the Candy Kingdom of OO, all is now truly wonderfully sweet.